Hello and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. This time we're going to be talking about mystical structures around the world. It's a return visit for our guest, Jim Swan. Jim has a PhD in environmental psychology and is project director at the Institute for the Human Environment in San Francisco. Jim, to review for anybody who didn't hear the earlier program, what are the qualities of a sacred spot?
A sacred spot, Charlie, is a place where, in a sense, it's out of the ordinary. It's an extraordinary place where many worlds seem to bridge and join and become one. It's the kind of place where through nature, through human structures, you get a blending of many different levels of energy and beyond forms of thought and intelligence beyond what we really truly understand. And people seem to experience transcendence there more likely than in other places. It's a sort of place that there's a bit of magic about it. Being there, there's a twinkle or sparkle in the air that's unusual, and people tend to feel more powerful, more alive at places like Chartres, Mount Shasta, the Black Hills, Palenque, places like this.
One of the things that we determined last time when we talked was that even though there are unexplained elements, many unexplained elements to sacred places, there are some aspects, verifiable data that exist there. Why don't you review some of those conditions?
Okay, good. Studying some of the sacred places, we can say that there are unusual electromagnetic fields in some of them that are strong enough to harmonize with human brain waves through a process called biological entrainment and actually generate brainwave patterns that are more favorable to human creativity and inspiration. There is an abundance of negative ions in some of these places. This we know is relaxing, invigorating, and enriching. Then if we move to human structures, we can say that the geometric form of the building itself is such that it resonates with a certain unique kind of vibrancy about it that also harmonizes with us. And it's sort of like, you think about people playing music, well, in this case, the buildings play music on us. We become the musical notes. And the total cumulative process is one of kind of stimulating literally every sort of cell within your body to a state where we transcend. We live in several worlds at the same time.
Okay, I want to create a mystical place, okay, hypothetically. And I decide on the design of a pyramid, because a pyramid has some of those properties that you've just talked about.
All right.
How do I go about locating a spot on the planet where I'm going to construct my pyramid to make that a holy place for generations to come?
Okay, good. According to the ancient traditions, there was an art and science, and there still is today, of locating the exact thing to be done at any one given place. It's called geomancy in general, and it varies from the Persian magi to the feng shui of China to the African geomancers to shaman in various parts of the world. On a theoretical level, you could say that what would be done is that you'd want to look at the unique harmonic properties of a pyramid, for example, and to say that each place on the face of the earth has its own resonant harmonic qualities to it, and that the ideal concept is to find a place on the earth that has the same harmonic or complementary harmonic qualities as that structure you're talking about, so that the two actually merge and join and become one, and the result is that they sort of resonate and harmonize with each other.
Okay, now if I'm an early Egyptian, though, I don't have any tool that's going to measure that, and I still have this idea of this pyramid, and I want to put it up somewhere.
But you do have a tool, and the tool is the exquisitely developed human mind. In one way, you can say that every technology that we have is really a replication of a human potential. Some people have perfect pitch. And if you lived your entire life being trained to develop that pitch in such a way so that you could literally sense the harmony of a place, that you could use that. And let me give you an example of how the people in the past were able to do this and actually use it. It's said that in the great cathedrals of Europe, each one has been built to resound with a specific musical note or tone. To test this out, I know a group of professional musicians who were traveling around through Europe, and they would stand outside the church for a moment and all be quiet, and they would agree that when one would raise a hand, they would all walk inside. When one of them would raise their hand, they would all sound out the note that they felt moved to sing by the place. So they'd stand outside like sharp, walk in, assemble in various parts of the church without a word spoken. They'd remain in silence for a minute or two, and then one would raise the hand and all would sing a note. And in every church, they all came out with the same note. What's more, they found that each church had a unique note to it. And this is according actually to the ancient traditions, which St. Bernard among them talked about the idea of geometry in service of prayer. It's like some of those old cathedrals are built to actually best resonate with Gregorian chants, for example. So we do have an instrument, and it is the exquisitely developed and tuned human mind.
Let's talk about some of the other traditions. You made reference to feng shui. What is that literally, and how does it work?
Feng shui is a form of Chinese divining or geomancy. It literally means wind and water. And its origins can be traced back to the first emperor, Fu Hongxi. Chinese audience listeners, I hope that's correct pronunciation.
Okay.
Supposedly, looking upward, contemplated the forms in the heavens, astrological symbols, and looking downward, contemplated the patterns on the earth, and sought to bring the two together, and that was literally the beginning essence of feng shui. The feng shuis themselves developed an exquisite art of earth planning, the main instrument being a compass. You're talking about instruments, and they claim to be the developers of the compass. In the feng shui compass, however, there are 32 concentric rings, each one of which deals with a different aspect of reality. Some of them deal with astrology, the heavens. There are various stars that seem to have a resonance with various places on the earth. There are various astrological symbols that relate to other kinds of places and influence in the world. There are landforms, each of which has its special resonant frequency to it. There are soil, water, mountain shapes, and forms in the four directions of the earth. And what they would do is they would, at any one given place, consult that compass and determine from all these different variables what is the human activity which is most suited to that site. And the feng shuis, we can talk about, some people might say, well, that's superstition, but the reality is their buildings work. The Great Wall is still standing. It's built on an ancient dragon line that marches across the ridge tops in China. The Forbidden City is there, and it still attracts people in droves and who just exclaim about its beauty. The temples, the tombs of ancient China. The feng shuis have not practiced, as I understand it, to any great extent in mainland China for a number of years, but in Taiwan and in Hong Kong, and certainly here in San Francisco's Chinatown, they still do practice. And one of the kinds of questions that we have to deal with here is that if we can't explain everything that they do on these 32 layers of the compass and how it relates to science, the basic issue is what works. And the fact is that their buildings work. They're standing, they feel good to be in, they seem to promote whatever kinds of human commerce that goes on inside of them.
Let's talk about materials in the building of a structure, a mystical structure, or let's call them sound structures
Yeah.
in another sense of the word sound. Do you go with the materials that are there that are already in harmony? If you go to a mountainous area and there are a lot of rocks, do you build the building out of, or the structure out of rocks because they're there and they're a part of that natural environment? Or might you have to import materials from thousands of miles away because of the harmonics?
Okay, good. It depends on the nature of the kind of activity you want to do there. We know that each type of stone has a harmonic resonance to it, which generates a certain field frequency, and that structured in the right form can actually facilitate certain like notes or harmonic notes. And each note has a function of relating to an aspect of consciousness. So you can say that, for example, if the rocks were harmonious with that kind of activity, then most clearly you'd do that. But supposing that wasn't the case, and in some cases you may find that because of land changes, because of fires, storms, floods, volcanic activity, that vegetation or rock types that used to be in a place aren't there anymore. So in a sense, you might bring them back in to complete the original paradigm picture that was there in the first place. It varies according to the type of human activity. And let me give you an example of this. It's like the ideal chess palace is one that's situated on the top of a relatively small mountain, but with fairly steep sides, and they tend to level off the top of the mountain. In a sense, it's like gathering the exuberance of that sort of yang energy as it peaks towards the top of the mountain, towards its apex, and then leveling it, for a sense of control and disciplined excitement. In contrast, an ideal home site would be at the base of a gently sloping hill where there's a meandering stream going by, and it would be south-facing, and there's some bamboo or something else like that to capture and hold the life energy that would normally be blown away by strong winds. And so in a sense, you have to ask, what is the human activity as well as what are the materials? But in general, I think you can say that natural materials are the things that we're looking for. Natural materials are the preferred building materials of all the geomantic traditions that I know of.
Let's talk about some specific mystical structures and see if we can't place them in time and space and materials and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Pick one. What's the most famous?
Well, for me, one of the most magical is Chartres Cathedral in France. And, it's magical for all kinds of reasons, but for me, a sacred site is one that is a microcosm of the macrocosm. It's sort of like a reflection of totality. And the ultimate joy at Chartres, here's this place built of large stones that resonates with beautiful qualities when people sing. But every year, on the summer solstice, at exactly when the sun reaches its apex at high noon, light from the sun will strike a small golden pane in one of those beautiful colored windows. It goes down from that pane directly to the floor, where it strikes a bright golden tile on the floor. And for a minute or two or three, only once a year, there's this beautiful beam of golden light that just goes literally from the sun all the way down to the floor of the church with ultimate predictability. Now, that to me is a building designed to honor the beauty and power of nature.
What about an ancient structure that doesn't exist in its original form? Stonehenge.
Okay, well, Stonehenge is an example of taking extremely large stones believed to have come from miles away. The legend says they walked there. People today seem to feel that they could have been carried, but placing them in such a way so that they honor and respect the positions of the sun and the moon. And in a sense, what that does is that it's like a reflection again of nature, and of the passage of the planets and of the sun over the place. And it's a way that helps to accentuate nature itself and help it resonate with the human mind. You can find it there. You can find a similar condition in Chaco Canyon in the southwest. It's a very ancient solar observatory of the Anasazi Indians that does a similar thing, where again at the summer solstice there is this dagger of light that slips between two giant stones and strikes a spiral on the cliff at exactly the moment of high noon on the summer solstice. And there's a drama and excitement there of being able to, of the 365 days of the year, to actually plan for this to happen.
Are there other scientifically verifiable signs other than the beams of light that you've talked about? Are there any things that can be measured with a Geiger counter or any other sophisticated scientific instrument?
Well, what you can do is you can say that in certain structures anyways, that definitely certain musical notes, certain tonal qualities are stronger. You can also look at the stone circles in England, and it has been shown by a group of researchers called the Dragon Project in England, university faculty members there, that within the stone circle and its immediate proximity, there are unusual electromagnetic and other kinds of environmental fields that are generated by the stones, and not only generated by the stones, but in interplay with the positioning of the sun and the moon. In other words, the energies from them strike them in such a way so that at those periods we might guess that they would be most intense. Indeed they are, which would be things like the summer, the solstices, for example, and sunrise.
What about Easter Island? That's one that I think there's a wide familiarity with now. A number of television programs were done about it. These stone statues that were stuck all over the sides of the hills on Easter Island, and the patterns when you look at it from the air, and it looks like a landing strip or something.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's a whole theory based on that. I'm not sure, what to do with the theories about communicating like with people from outer space, which is a theme that runs through a lot of the sacred sites. I know that in the dreaming and visionary process of most shamanistic traditions, that it is common to see in your mind's eye spiritual beings descending from heaven to earth. Now, whether you translate that literally into beings from outer space, or whether you see it as being spiritual presences materializing in the material world, I think is another question. We weren't around then. I don't know. Maybe somebody landed. I'm not sure.
Have any tests been done on those stones on Easter Island to determine whether or not they are native to the island or whether they were transported from somewhere else?
I believe they're native to the island.
What about the shape of the pyramid? How did the Egyptians and other ancient peoples that built pyramid structures come to build pyramids? Why didn't they build big squares or big rectangles or octagons or something else?
Well, according to the ancient alchemical and other kinds of esoteric traditions, if you were to meditate upon certain energy centers or chakras of the body, that certain mythic symbols keep coming up again and again and again. And one of these is the pyramid. It's associated with the second chakra, which is the source of creativity. And I've seen this. Jack Schwartz, who is a fairly well-known naturopath, has done this with like thousands and thousands of people, having them meditate on this. And what they find is that the second chakra is activated by it. So one case history that I have of a person who visited the place felt the second chakra is also associated a lot with emotions. And this woman walked into the pyramid and felt overwhelmed by a series of emotional things in her life that she hadn't recognized for years. And the only way I can explain that is that for some reason or other, the energy of the place was such that it harmonized with that part of her body and brought that part of her consciousness to the forefront.
What are the Nazca markings? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, in southern South America, in southern South America, out in the plains of Peru, there are a series of giant symbols that have been traced out on a very flat plain. Some by stones, some by people possibly dancing, actually. They're large birds, animals, circles, and lines. Here again, this is one of the theories about them communicating to the gods or beings from outer space because they can be best seen from the air. But they are, to my understanding, they are quite visible to this day.
Are there any are there any modern mystical structures?
Very few, in terms of the ancient traditions. Modern architecture and design, and I'm going to say I don't know of any.
What about the Transamerica Pyramid?
Yeah, well, that's good. That's definitely more creative than a lot of the others. Sure, I like that much better, definitely. But I think modern architecture and planning suffers from the same problems that modern medicine does, in that modern medicine has tended to look at technique and symptomology. Architecture does the same thing. Most buildings, in fact, I should say in defense of architects, are not built without architects these days, at least in terms of large buildings. Someone comes with an idea, you go to a drawer, pull out the plans and specifications, and you build the building according to codes. The creative design function is often left out. But what is really lacking to me in the whole design profession is a sense of inner awareness that the ancient ones, like the Egyptians, had, where they spent as much time fine-tuning themselves as they did their technique. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of large modern buildings may feel dead, to be in them. And we can contrast this. I should flip this around a bit to say that there are some examples of things that are moving in other directions. Here, Levi Strauss in San Francisco is an example to me of moving in the other direction, especially Levi Strauss Plaza. Now, I do know that that was planned more along the lines of the feng shui type traditions. One side is yang, active, flowing water, square, lots of activity. The other is yin, flowing water in a stream, gently meandering, little hills like a mountain meadow. It's passive. And the whole thing looks like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon from the outside. That's an example more, I would say, of a feng shui type harmonious environmental design. And my guess is that if you interviewed the workers working there, they would feel a lot more strongly and positively about the place.
Let's go back. I just flashed on something. Let's take a high-rise San Francisco building that's rectangular and really not very pleasant and not really in harmony with nature or anything else. The people who constructed that building were by and large union people who made a good wage and went away from it and took care of their families and all that sort of thing. The Great Pyramids in Egypt were built with slave labor. A lot of people died on the job. I'm sure the first aid kits weren't readily available and that sort of thing. So you had mentioned that the Egyptians spent so much time fine-tuning themselves, and yet their society was far from perfect.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. Sure. I guess the question that I want to ask, though, is that, look, the fellows who built the buildings, okay, ladies too, they build it according to a set of plans. The unions and all that's great. They've done their job and they've done it well. But the question that I'm asking is that can you demonstrate to me that that type of building structure and form is the one that's most appropriate to facilitating the expression of human potentiality. You know, I'm not against putting people together, putting people into work building buildings. It's definitely needed. God only knows we need more effective buildings in the world. But the reality is that most buildings are built for efficiency. They are not designed to facilitate human effectiveness. The whole science of environmental psychology, didn't even come into being until a decade ago, and the reality is that most buildings are not built. They are built in terms of images. It's like in schools, Until relatively recently, there was the monument style of building a school, and the basic theme was that it was a sense of glorification of the design of the architect or planner, and it was designed, in all honesty, to control kids. And it says this, but that's the purpose of it. Now, look, talk about discipline problems. If you put them into a school, and I just a year or two ago was consulting on on the school systems in the state of Washington on this. The basic line that says if you design a building that's set to control kids, and it says that in the specifications, you ask why they get upset, why they get angry, why they feel bored and restless. The reality is the building's not designed to facilitate their own creative expression. Who's going to, it's like putting them in a jail, we need to think through that kind of design, and I think it can, it could be documented, and it could be done.
Let's get back to mystical structures for a second. If in an ongoing theme here on Infinity, many of the people that we've talked to suggest that there is a oneness of humanity, that everything is interrelated. If that is the case, then why isn't it that every place on the planet is in its own way a sacred spot and has the potential for constructing a mystical structure? Why are some places different than others, or more special?
Well, let's look at it this way. Nature is a sense, and I'll quote the feng shuis, of balance, of active and passive, yin and yang, night and day, solar and lunar. If the whole Earth was this charged place that facilitated transcendent experiences all the time, we'd probably burn out pretty quickly. You have to have a place of rest and quiet and peace to return to after ascending the mountain, and literally transcending and uniting with the gods. And what we haven't done enough of is recognize and honor and respect those differences.
You've mentioned some traditional places mostly associated with Indian culture and Indian religion in the United States. Are there any modern structures? Really want to get back to it. Are there any places that have a strong potential for the development of a mystical structure in the United States?
Okay. One place that I'd direct you to is a developing community called Arcasante out in the deserts in the southwest that's being built by Paolo Solari. That's one I believe definitely is designed along those lines, that is in terms of sacred architecture. I also know an architect in Oregon, Lawrence Schechter, who has gone through the process of studying these traditions, and he's designed two holistic health centers now that are based upon sacred geometry and using people like an Indian shaman and others to come in and design the landforms. So there are a couple. Yeah, I shouldn't have spoken so hastily a minute ago, but he's a real rare person, to be doing this. But there is some, yeah.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen to your heart. I'm Charlie Seraphin.